everyone, welcome to part 2 of this chapter. So we are going to actually understand the inline elements and block elements. So when we format the web pages with CSS, we use the set rules that can describe how the HTML element should appear on the web, on the browser. So HTML elements are basically positioned on the web page as a block or as inline content. So a block element appears as a block because it starts and ends with a new line, such as the main element or maybe a paragraph element. Block elements contain content other than blocks elements, and inline elements are displayed without the line breaks, so they flow within the same line. Inline content always appear within block elements. So the example of inline elements are maybe the span tag and the anchor tag. We can use the span element to group the inline elements, and so we can use the span, use the style that we want, maybe the color, and then close that tag. Element is also an inline element because it flows in the same line. Header, navigation, main, and footer, they are all examples of block elements. So that's something that you might want to consider. The next thing we are going to talk about is the CSS box model. Each block element, such as those ones that I just discussed, header, nav, main, and footer element, has a top, right, bottom, and left side. In other words, the element is displayed in a browser as a box with the content in it. The CSS box model describes these boxes of content on a web page. Each content box can have margin, border, and padding, as you can see in this picture here. The margin, it provides massive white space between the block element or between the top or bottom of a page. We can define the margin as the top, right, bottom, left of a block element. Margin, again, are transparent, and they can also be measured in pixels, the EMs, or percentage. The border separates the padding and the margin of the block element. A border can vary in thickness and color, and it can be defined again as top, right, bottom, and left side of the block element. A border can also have a style such as maybe solid, maybe dashed, or dotted. Padding is the passive white space between the content and the border of a block element. Padding is also measured in pixels, EMs, or percentage. By default, padding is set to be 0 pixels. So paragraph text, for example, appear in the edge of the block element. We can increase the padding to improve the legibility. The box element includes more than the default element of the padding that we just saw in the previous slide. The background color for the padding and content is always the same. So this example here, it shows the list of common CSS box properties that can be used to style block elements. So these are the properties, the description, and also the examples that you can use. So in order to have a border appear around the content in a block element, we must specify a border style in the CSS element. We can include the style value with the border property or use the border style property with the assigned value. One thing that we are missing in this slide, I don't know what happened to it, is the creating an external style sheet. We can create a style that applies to more than one page in a website using an external style sheet. So this is very common that developer, they use this. So using an external style sheet normally has 2 steps. First, we can use a text editor to create and save a document with a .css extension. In the CSS document, we then can create the style rule for elements such as maybe the body, header, navigation, main, and footer to improve the visual appeal of our website. We also can use the style to add color and borders, and also apply the text properties, align items, and also increase the white space for padding and margin. Then we can link the CSS file to the web pages, and then that's it. We created our external style sheet. The next thing that we are going to talk about is about selectors. So the style rule begins with a selector which specifies the element of a style. A selector can be an HTML element name, an ID attribute value, or class attribute value. If the selector is an HTML element, we can use the element name for the selector. And then if it's for the ID, an ID attribute value, an ID or a class selector is used to apply the style to the P element. So an ID selector uses the ID attribute value of an HTML document to select a single element. To create an ID selector, we can begin the style rule with the number sign, followed by ID attribute value. For instance, to style the div ID container element, we use the number sign container. And then we can put the style that we want in the bracket. A class selector, for a class selector to be used, we can create a class selector by using the style rule with the period sign, followed by the class attribute value. For instance, to style class mobile, we use .mobile as the character. So this is the style rule that we apply to set the font size to 10 for all the elements that use this class, that they use the mobile class. So you can use it as a class selector. And if you want to create a style that applies to an element contained within another element, you list the element in the order they appear to create the selector in the style rule. This type of selector, we call it descendant selector. So if you want, so you use the nav here, the list. So the following style rule set the list style property to none. For what? For the unordered list. So for the unordered list, you put the list style to none. So you don't want to apply the style. So I would suggest you to go back to the Forward Fitness Club that we were working as part of the HTML document, and let's think about that we want to create a apply the style sheet to have some sort of a format or a layout layout. So we can create them in external style sheet. You might want to say, why do we want that? Because as remember, the external style sheet apply to all pages and the website. To create a CSS file, we can use the text editor that we like, and we create a file and we can actually save it as a CSS document. So it has to be .css. Then we can include one more style rule that apply to all web pages that is linked to the CSS document. The first style rule sets the background color of the web page. This rule, we use body as the selector and background color property in the declaration. So as you can see here, we have the body and then we have the background property, and then this was the format that in the declaration format that we just talked about. And then we are using the hexadecimal color here, and then we use the semicolon. So you can actually create this as part of your tutorial when you are going through this chapter. So after we do that, then we need to be able to link an HTML document to a CSS file. So remember, this is the last step. So we need so when we are creating external style sheet, there are two steps. So this is the last part, is linking an HTML document to CSS. If you don't link it, it's not going to find and apply these styles. So you can insert a link element on the HTML page within the head tag. And the link element also uses two attributes, the relative and href. The rel attribute uses the style sheet value to indicate the document is linked to a style sheet. And the href attribute value specifies the file path or the file name of the CSS file that we have. So let's look at the example here. We are using link rel equals to the style sheet, and then we are actually going to put the file name or the location of the file that CSS file exists. The type is text CSS attribute, and value is also commonly used within a link element to reference a CSS file. In HTML5, we don't need the type attribute. It's not necessary to use it. So you might wonder, why do we need to include CSS/ before the name of the file? So the style.css file normally is located within the CSS folder. So because the file is not stored in the same folder as the index.html document, we should include the folder name as well as the file name in the href attribute value. So you can try this you can actually go to page 156 of your book in chapter 4 and try this, and then you can see that you have basically applied some sort of a style to your web page. In the next video, we are going to talk about aligning the web page content. Okay, see you in the next video.